Well, hi everybody. So today we're going to be having a look here at FlySimWare's Nieuport 24. Now, before we go any further, I do want to mention this is a ported aircraft and it does cost money. It's not a bad one though. I will admit that. Kind of like it. So we're going to go ahead and kind of do all the normal stuff. We'll hop in the cockpit, have a look around, we'll get it started, go fly it around for a second, and then at the end of this, we'll do a review on it. But either way, I did want to mention that it is a ported aircraft, which is something I'm probably going to repeat quite often throughout this review. So with all that kind of out of the way, let's go hop in the cockpit here and get started. Alrighty, well here we are in the Nieuport, which, you know, keeping in mind this is a ported product that I believe started out on FSX, and it kind of got ported all the way back to here, which I guess makes it kind of full circle. It looks, you know, pretty good for what it is. It's got some rough edges. It lets some light through here in the fuselage and everything like that, but some of it actually does look surprisingly good. So, you know, the only thing I guess else here is that we do have a bit of a fisheye lens, which I'm not going to complain about. I kind of like it in a way. It makes this thing look like it's going quite fast when we're flying, which I guess y'all will see here in a minute or so. Alrighty, well, we've got the clipboard / tablet thing over here on the right side of the cockpit. Once we bring this up, we have the ability to hide or show the machine guns, put the cockpit cover on. You can remove the chocks from in here. You can also do that with whatever you've mapped to parking brake. We have the service doors, the engine cowling, and this little fuel cart. And that's pretty much it. We can go ahead and open up the window here. Not entirely sure if this counts as a feature, but, you know, it's something you can do. Alrighty. Well, we're going to go ahead and get this thing started. Now, I'm going to skip some of the steps that are listed in the checklist because it's got you doing a couple of things you don't really need to. We'll come over here to the mixture and we'll put this up to rich. Go over to the right side of the cockpit to the fuel pump, and we'll go ahead and we'll click on this until we see 7 psi. Once we've done that, we'll come up here to the hand crank. We'll click on this and we'll hold that down pretty much until it turns over. Once it turns over, you can let it go. Now it's going to sound like it's going to die. It's not going to, but we'll give it a little bit of throttle here so it doesn't sound so bad. And then we need to come up here to the oil valve and turn that on. I'm not sure the oil valve is absolutely necessary, but I go ahead and turn it on anyway. And that's pretty much it. So we've got the Nieuport started, so we're going to go ahead and go take this thing off and fly it around for a second. Alrighty. Well, as far as taxiing this thing goes, it's fine as long as you don't want to turn. It gets a little difficult to turn it. Probably about the easiest way to turn it is to actually just dig a wing into the ground, give it a bunch of power, and it's about the quickest way to turn it around. It does have a tendency to kind of want to tip over. Other than that, nothing to really worry about. Now, as far as takeoff goes, it's incredibly easy to take off, and that's because it happens in about 5 seconds. So we're going to go ahead and throttle up here. Tail's probably going to come off the ground about 25 knots, and it's going to really easily be off the ground before 40. And we're in the air. So we're just going to continue to accelerate here until about 120 knots, which is around about probably its normal speed and level flight. You can get it pretty easily up to about 130 though. Now, as far as how it flies, it's a lot of fun to fly. I gotta be honest with that one. It's incredibly fun to fly, or at least I've been having a lot of fun flying it. But either way, it's incredibly predictable. It's nice and stable. It feels somewhat light, but it does still have somewhat of a sluggish roll rate. You can always increase that with the rudder, but either way, it doesn't roll very fast, but it certainly turns real nice. And it climbs pretty well, and it's actually pretty quick. Now, as far as, let's say, overstressing the airframe or anything like that, you really don't have to worry about that. I have not. The only time I've ever broken this plane is when I went above about 200 knots. And it's going to let you know that it's going to break. It's going to start kind of shaking and all the rest of that stuff. But either way. Now, as far as how this thing stalls, it has basically 3 kinds of stalls. If one of them, it'll dip the wing. It's not going to put you into a spin naturally. You're going to kind of have to force it to do that. And then it has one where it kind of drops the nose. It has a third one that's a little bit weird, where it kind of just sits here and floats. But other than that, all those stalls are going to happen somewhere around about 36 miles an hour, or 36 knots. Now, as far as how aerobatic it is incredibly aerobatic for what it is. It's pretty much going to do all of the basic maneuvers that you want it to do, maybe some more than that. It's not going to do, let's say, I'm going to call them complex, but they're not complex. They just require more power to do, so it's not going to be doing things like avalanches or knife edges or anything like that. Unfortunately, it will not do it outside the loop. The reason for that partially is because when we go inverted here, we end up starving the engine of fuel. So kind of on your upswing of the outside loop, you just don't have enough power to do it. But either way, it's kind of a nice tail slide out of that. Either way, it's certainly a fun plane to go fly around in. Now, again, it does have a kind of a light feel to it. It will get blown around by the wind and everything like that, so really strong winds are really going to kind of blow this thing around. But either way, it's an incredibly fun plane to go fly. And if for whatever reason you and your friends like to, I don't know, do dogfights in World War I planes, if you pick this one up, you're going to win. It's going to outperform all the ones that I know of. It will utterly destroy that tri-wing. This thing will out-turn it, out-climb it, and it is much faster than it is, and it will beat it in a dive. So, if you want to win, you know, buy this one. Either way, I think I'm pretty much just going to bring it in here for a landing. Otherwise, I'm going to sit here and fly this thing around for the next 45 minutes. I'm just having too much fun with it. But either way, as far as landing here goes, we have this little red switch here on top of the stick, which is the blip switch. It's going to cut the engine for you. It might make it a little bit easier to land. This thing does not like to slow down. Now, I'm not going to use the blip switch simply because you can't map it to anything, so I'd actually have to click on it, which is a little bit unfortunate, but either way, it's not difficult to land this thing without it. We do want to go ahead and pretty much just cut the throttle all the way down to 0, because you want to come in here at about 50 knots or so. We really don't want to come in much faster than that, because this thing does not like to slow down, and any kind of descent causes this thing to, at the very least, pick up a pretty good amount of speed. So we'll just kind of come in here. I guess we're doing about 40 knots right now. We want to set down a little bit below 40. So we'll just kind of let it flare here. We'll just kind of flare it, and it will pretty gradually set itself down here. It'll be pretty smooth, probably. What I will say is that once you do touch down, any kind of correction on your rudder may cause this thing to tip over, because it does like to tip over. Now, it does stop pretty quickly, but it does have brakes. I haven't run into a situation where I nose planted or anything like that, but either way, that's pretty much it here for the Nieuport. So we're going to go ahead and go into the review, and that'll be it for today. Alrighty, well, if you want to pick up FlySimWare's Nieuport 24, it's available from their website as well as the Microsoft Flight Simulator Marketplace for about $15. I'm going to assume that if you buy it through the Marketplace, though, you probably won't end up with a machine gun. It's not like you're really missing out on anything. It's not like it works or anything like that. As far as the model goes, it's fairly detailed, all things considered, for such a simple plane. Just as an example, all of the rigging is present, including the rigging inside of the fuselage. But in terms of the model quality itself, there aren't any gaps or anything like that, and everything joins together quite nicely. There are a few points where it's not perfectly smooth. Most notably probably is going to be the wood frame inside the fuselage. The texture quality is quite good. If you're looking for problems, you might find some. It's mostly the wood grain for the frame. However, the wood grain on the propeller looks really nice, and you can get pretty close to it and not notice any problems. The canvas or fabric, whatever you want to call it, also looks good as well. The animations are nice and smooth. Everything's movement looks right. One of the things I was surprised about with this one is that when the plane lifts off the ground, the wheels keep spinning, which I thought was a nice little attention to detail. Most planes in Microsoft Flight Simulator, when you lift off the ground, the wheels just stop for no reason. In the context of this being a ported aircraft, it looks fantastic. It certainly doesn't look out of place or anything like that in Microsoft Flight Simulator. As far as the sound quality goes, it's good. Everything is crisp and clear. It might not sound exactly like the real thing, but it's certainly not unpleasant to listen to or anything like that. The sounds seem to be somewhat customized. It doesn't sound like a bunch of sound effects from the Microsoft Flight Sim sound library. In terms of the sound effects, everything seems to have a sound for the most part. There are sort of two missing sound effects. One of them is rather trivial, but it doesn't have a sound effect when it's rolling across the ground. It does have a touchdown sound effect, but it doesn't last very long, and it's not really present when taxiing. The second one is that it doesn't kind of creak when you put a lot of stress on the airframe. If they could add the creaking airframe, that would be great. Personally, I don't really care about the rolling sound effects as much as I do about the creaking airframe. But overall, the sounds in general are really pretty good. Now, like all of my reviews, I've never flown one of these, so who the hell knows how realistic it is. I'm sure somebody does, but it's not me. Either way, it's a lot of fun to fly. It's incredibly stable. You can pretty much take your hands off this thing and not really worry about it. It does get blown around in the wind a little bit, but for the most part, you can fly this thing with your rudder pedals. It's very aerobatic. It's not going to do anything that requires excessive amounts of power or really anything that's inverted, but it does all of the basic stuff really well. It's a very easy plane to kind of just hop in and go fly around. The only thing that it doesn't do well is turn around on the ground. I don't really know if anybody considers turning around on the ground to be part of the flight model. Oddly enough, that might be a very realistic aspect of this plane. If I remember right, the real one doesn't have brakes and it doesn't have a tail wheel. I kind of assumed that they would just send like 2 or 3 guys to the back of the plane to pick it up and turn it around. I mean, it didn't weigh anything. It's basically like one step above the paper airplane. Anyway, they did do a nice job representing the gravity-fed carburetor, which was a nice little detail to add in here. And in the context of what this plane is, it's very quick and it has a fairly high top speed. Again, within the context of what it is. It does lack engine damage, but overall it's a really fun plane to go fly around. As far as the features go, it's pretty standard for this type of add-on. They're fine. They can get a little goofy, I will admit that. For instance, you can fly around with the cockpit cover on. You can also turn the fuel card on in the air. It does disappear almost instantly, but it is kind of funny that it takes it a second to realize that it shouldn't be on in the air. You also get 6 liveries with this thing. As far as the quality goes, they're fine. They all look really good. So overall, it's a pretty decent plane, and none of the problems I've mentioned detract too much from its price. And again, it's a fantastic looking ported aircraft, regardless of how realistic it is. And I'm not saying that it's not. I don't really know. What I think is that 120 knots is kind of pushing it, and that makes me wonder about some of the other stuff. Either way, it's certainly loads of fun to go fly. It's easy to pick up. You pretty much get in the air, and you're, Roy Brown or you're the Red Baron. Preferably Roy Brown, because he makes it. But again, it's an easy plane to just go hop in and take off, mainly because it's off the ground in about 5 seconds. But it's the first sort of aerobatic plane that I've picked up in a couple of months, and it really has been kind of a really fun thing to kind of test out and go fly around in. And that's pretty much going to be it for today, guys, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.